Now, something that could seriously affect your plant's happiness is knowing when to repot them. What we have today is a one-time cymbidium orchid, which is really an easy orchid to look after. I mean, if there are any orchids that you want to delve into, then I would go with the cymbidium. It has an amazing flower, long spades, from yellows, pinks, reds, mottled. And the interesting thing is that a cymbidium orchid can actually be planted in the ground, and it can cope with quite low temperatures, not frost, but low temperatures. In the ground, as long as it receives a bit of light, and light is the point, it can't be in shade. Too dark a shade makes these leaves get really broad, and then your flower is going to be compromised. So dappled light is perfect, just in the shade of a tree where it can still get some low lighting, or in a pot as this one is. But I have to admit, quite embarrassingly, that this poor cymbidium has been in here for years and has had no attention, which is why it didn't flower this season. When do they flower? They flower during the winter months. Quite interestingly, that during the coldest times in our country, that we are still able to get these guys to flower. They love the lower temperatures. So let's get this guy out. When do you plant them, or when do you transplant them? I'm often asked, if yours hasn't flowered, well then any time. And if it has flowered, once it has completed flowering, then it's the best time to transplant. So we're going to need a mix for this, and what I've got is a good quality potting soil, and cymbidiums are really forgiving. As I mentioned, you can plant them in the ground. So all we're wanting is we're looking for a loose, friable, chunky mix, and we can put that together at half the price. Now, I'm not dissing orchid bark mixes, guys. There are many specialist orchids out there and mixes that are needed for certain orchids, but for the cymbidium, you can get away with murder. Now, guys, I've got this over here. It is a good quality potting soil. I'm going to open up the bag and show you exactly why and what we are going to add to it. Right, guys, this is a standard potting soil, and there is certainly nothing wrong with this. It's got some nice chunky bark in it. It's got some good moisture. Here's a tip. If you don't use your entire bag of potting soil, don't just leave it with the bag open, because potting soil, compost, ornamental mix, any of them have a certain amount of moisture. What happens is when that moisture leaves the bag, it dries out to a point where sometimes it's really difficult to rehydrate the bark, because potting soil is mainly made up, and your compost, of composted bark. And when it gets to that point, when you pick it up, you can see this has got a lovely color. It's beautiful and dark. Sometimes when you open a bag and it's gray, it looks gray. That means it is very, very dry. And you almost need to soak that and allow the moisture in. So if you've only used half a bag, make sure you seal it up properly, put a bit of tape on it, because you'll be much happier, and you'll thank me for it a bit later. Right, so there we've got that. What I'm going to add to this is something that looks a bit odd when you look at the label. It is a bark nugget, or a decorative bark. Now, what is decorative bark? Well, it's basically just bits of bark that have been sieved out, and they give you that chunky look. Now, what we're looking for in a cymbidium mix is something that is really chunky, that's got lots of jagged edges to allow the roots breathing room. Air is one of the most important aspects in any orchids. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to add a bit of this into here, probably about equal amounts of the potting soil that I've added. There we go. And I love this because it's got the textures that I'm wanting, really a bit jagged, not uniform, which is perfect for what we're looking for. Finally, last thing we're going to add is a good general purpose organic fertilizer. Now, this will mean that in the months to come, I needn't worry about fertilizing 1, 2, 3 handfuls. And if you wanted to add a 4th handful, it's also okay. All right, let's mix this up to get a good equal consistency. Right, happinesses. Now, let's attack the cymbidium. This is going to be really interesting to take it out. Why? Pots that are always difficult to work with are pots that are this kind of bell shape, where they will go narrower at the top than they are around the width, as in its waist. And this always makes it incredibly challenging to get a plant out. Sometimes you actually have to destroy the pot. As a general rule, I really don't like these pots, so this must have been many years ago. So I might need some interesting implements to get this out. This is a traditional weeder, but I think it's going to do the job here. And I also don't want to destroy the plant at the same time. So there's only one way to do this, and that's to dive right in. I'm going to pop this baby on its side. There we go. And what I'm going to start doing now is taking my weeding fork, which is very interesting, and just getting in there. Do you see what I like about this thing here? Do you see that there? When I pop it against the edge of the pot, do you see I've actually got, I've got a bit of force against there. And slowly we're just going to work our way around this and swing it as we're going. Oh, lovely. There it comes. Lovely, lovely, lovely. And this is what we want. It was quite a battle. Do you see why? I never want to plant in these pots. I call them the Alibaba pot. You know, it's like that. My goodness. And I will tell you, at some point, an image of a 4-pound hammer did reveal itself in my head, but I did hold back and not actually destroy the terracotta pot. So now that it's out, we can really see what we're dealing with. And guys, this here, all of this, these are actually all dead roots. That is very typical of a orchid, of any plant that is needing desperate repotting. So the problem with this is that this then starts composting in the pot, and this is where diseases then start coming from. So this is where things start going south, when we are not repotting plants enough or at the right time. So all I'm going to do is just try and get these off here. We're also going to deal with a few what we call pseudo bulbs. Pseudo bulbs are bulbs that will never flower. And how do we identify them? I'll show you that in a second. But what we don't want to do, and please do not be one of those gardeners that will now take the cymbidium and divide it into 10 different pieces so you can have more. Guys, they sulk. They sulk, and more than likely, next year you will have zip flowers. So please don't do that. If anything, if you really have to, you divide it in half, but nothing more than that. Okay, so let's get our pair of secateurs, and then we are going to clean this baby up. So nice sharp pair of secateurs, and we are just going to take away all these dead bits here, because while you're in it, it's a perfect time to inspect the plant, see if there are any diseases. And this is here. Here is a pseudo bulb. So guys, this bulb is strong, it's firm, yet there are no growth points from it. No growth points, and that is what we call a pseudo bulb. So I am simply going to remove that, take it off. That we don't need. And let's flip this baby over. Okay, much cleaner, looking much healthier. Let's just pop it there. Don't judge. So, everything has a memory, a moment, somewhere that we can resonate with. And this pot has been in my pot storage, aka graveyard, for many years. And I got a variegated clivia out of this pot that was terribly miserable, and the soil had been probably compacted for about 100 years. And so I just can't throw the pot away, and I'm going to put my cymbidium back into it. It's probably about 100 years old, this pot, but let's just go back. What was I doing? I was just putting in bits of shade cloth at the bottom over the drainage holes, and that does the job. And then in goes at least a third of our mixture. Lovely, there we go. Right, let's check in terms of our height that we have. Now, your orchid, you never want to bury this bulb. This bulb must always sit just above your soil level, and we have got the right height. And now all we're going to do, just take our trowel and then pop this in. And as we are adding, I'm going to take this little guy again and just give it a jiggle jiggle. Just a jiggle jiggle so that we get the bark in between those roots. And you can see these roots, you can see they're firm, they're white, and this is the new growth. And that's basically what we've been left with after we took all that other rubbish away. And we now know we've got good mix. Roots being teased, all the bad stuff out, and all we need now is a really good watering. Important when you are watering anything, as a matter of fact, and even your cymbidium, especially your orchids, is a really good first watering. And you are going to water literally until the water drains out those drainage holes. Then you know that the bark has taken up sufficient moisture, and then you know that certainly for the next week your plant is going to be completely happy. But I reckon this guy's good to go, not quite for another 30 years, but at least for 5.